All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of The Air with Brian Gregory. We've got week 3 predictions for you tonight. An absolute jam-packed weekend we have. I've had this weekend circled on the calendar for a while, but it just so happens that it's here now, and so we're going to indulge in it this weekend. It's going to be a great weekend. I will say, today, leading up to the show, I was pondering back and forth on if I was going to have this show. Given the events of this afternoon with Charlie Kirk and the shooting that took place out in Utah. Absolutely devastating news, and I went back and forth on if I wanted to have it, just trying to gauge out the temperature of the room, because it's a tragedy of a lot of magnitude. And first and foremost, my heart goes out to Charlie Kirk's wife and his kids. I mean, those are the first people that came to mind when I saw that news break, and it's absolutely sickening to think that she's now without the love of her life, and those kids will barely know their father now, as they were young when this happened. And so absolutely devastating what happened today. And my takeaway from it is, now more than ever in this world, we need God. We need God to give us a sense of direction, because right now we've lost it more than ever. God really, truly is the only answer right now. And we need him. We're desperate for him now more than ever. And so my hearts go out to Charlie Kirk's family, everybody involved, and absolute tragedy. And I don't know where or how we got to this point of, we can disagree on things. We can see things from different angles. But to get to this point, I think that overall, as a society, we've lost the ability to decipher boundaries and levels to things. It's okay to not agree with somebody, but to go to the extent to take somebody else's life away because of it, that's a point where God is really absent from the room, which brings me back to my original point. We need God now more than ever. And so I acknowledge what happened, and I really, part of the reason why I pondered having the show is because I was very shaken up by what happened. The fact we've gotten this extreme, the fact that politics have gotten to this level, the news shook me, and I'm sure it's shaken a lot of you out here today. And it's something to really marinate on. It's something to compartmentalize. We're gonna have to ruminate on this for a while. But I also consider the fact that college football is a symbol of brightness. It's something that brings us all together, and I can't deprive people from that. I like this to be a place where people come to escape the troubles of the world and just let loose, talk about some football for a while. And even during tragedies, I think that we need that to bring us together, because we're not going to put an end to this shit. And we're not going to make this a more sane and safe place in this world until we're together again, because that's what God intends, is for us to be together and in harmony, relating to each other, and college football is a real beacon for that. And so that's what really influenced my decision to do this show tonight, and we're doing it. We're going full force. But I acknowledge what happened earlier. It made me sick. It choked me up when it happens, and it's something that I'm going to be thinking about for a while. And we all need to acknowledge and absorb what happened today, because it's a lot. But I think that it's also imperative that we use outlets like this to have fun, because that's also healthy for the mind too. And so we're going to be going on that note. Again, all prayers to everyone around Charlie Kirk, everyone involved in that situation, the people who had to witness that. Just want to take a moment to pray and let God in. And enable him to heal all of us from what happened to him, prevent shit like that from happening in the future. The first game on this jam-packed weekend is taking place in Knoxville, Tennessee, Neyland Stadium, between the Georgia Bulldogs and the Tennessee Volunteers. This is a premier SEC matchup here. This is what I like to call the Megan Maroney Bowl, right? Tennessee orange. I'll wear Tennessee orange for you, but she grew up in Georgia, went to Georgia, is an avid Georgia fan. But, you know, the guy she was talking to in that song wore Tennessee orange. She had to make the sacrifice. Well, somebody in the SEC is going to have to be a sacrifice here at some point because it's a deep conference. There's a lot of good teams, and there's two of them facing off in Knoxville this weekend. Georgia, Tennessee. I love this rivalry, too. It's another SEC border rivalry. If you're down there, you understand the intensity of these rivalries. You understand the intensity of these games, and these two are going to bring it. As everybody knows right now, Georgia has beaten Tennessee in 8 consecutive matchups. And so the question is, you know, Tennessee got the Alabama monkey off its back. Will they get the Georgia monkey off their back? Huge opportunity to do so this weekend. And assessing this matchup, I think that this team is more than capable of doing just that. This is a matchup that's going to teach us a lot about the competitive dynamic of the SEC because right now, some teams have been tested. You saw Alabama fall to Florida State. You saw Ole Miss and Kentucky last weekend. You saw Florida fall to South Florida. So we've seen with some teams, maybe you saw LSU get tested by Clemson. Tennessee kind of sort of did with Syracuse, but that's a middle-of-the-pack ACC team who both sides of the football from a roster standpoint, they're both very much developing. And so for both of these teams, this is a huge test and is going to give us a sense of direction when it comes to the SEC and what it may look like, how everything may unfold this year. Everybody's freaking out about Georgia right now because their performances on offense and both of their last 2 respective games, both Marshall and Austin Peay, it's been a little choppy. It's been a little concerning. There's a few things that stuck out to me. And so just going through box score, watch these games back, there was one thing about the Marshall game that really stuck out to me. You want to know who the leading rusher was? Gunnar Stockton, Georgia's quarterback. So last year we knew it was a prevalent issue with the Bulldogs that they couldn't really establish their running game like they had in past years. And that had been a major strength. They could not get it going last year. They could not find their identity. Their offensive line was also kind of clunky last year too. And this year, you're seeing similar issues. It's been against Marshall. It's been against Austin Peay. I know we have a short sample size, so you can't make any definitive judgments just yet. But you're seeing a few mildly concerning signs of Georgia. The other thing too, Georgia hasn't had a receiver go for 100 yards in a single game yet. I always get that 100 and 1,000 mixed up. I don't know why. But they have not had a receiver have 100 receiving yards in a game yet. And playing Marshall, playing Austin Peay, those are 2 matchups where, quite honestly, they should have had a 100-yard receiving game at this point, but they haven't yet. Georgia's defensive line has looked decent. You know, they've generated pressure as expected. Those offensive lines that they're going up against, I mean, compared to an SEC defensive line, they should be getting a lot of pressure. But nonetheless, they've been getting the job done. But when it comes to Georgia's offense, right, we're seeing some of the same symptoms from last year resurface this year. There does come a point, though, with a Kirby Smart coach team. Will they figure it out? Because that's those are key 3 words that we use with Nick Saban and with Kirby Smart. They always seem to figure it out at some point. When there's underperforming components of the team, there's something about those guys, their DNA, their fabric, their style of coaching, and their knowledge of the game, to where they're able to tap into strengths and really get it flowing, whatever unit it is that's underperforming. So, is this the game where Georgia really establishes itself and asserts its dominance to its run game once again, like it has done so notoriously in the past? Is this the game where Gunnar Stockton really comes out, where Gunnar Stockton really arrives? Because he did what he had to do to beat Texas in the second half of the SEC championship. The Notre Dame game wasn't anything special. The Marshall game was okay. Austin Peay was kind of shoddy. So is this the Gunnar Stockton arrival game? That's the question here. I'm going to say this about Joey Aguilar, because this man caught a lot of unnecessary strays in the offseason. There were a lot of people who shit on Joey Aguilar before he even took a snap for Tennessee because of how he played at App State. You know, he was inconsistent, was up and down. Never really played at UCLA, and now he's here at Tennessee. And so he's going from Sunbelt experience to the SEC. Trust me, he had his share of critics. He's had his share of people who did not believe in him. And it's been perceived and categorized by a lot of us going into the season that this is kind of a reset year for the Vols. It was expected, Josh Heupel acknowledged this, it was expected that they're going to lose a lot of guys this year to either the NFL and then, of course, your usual flow, the transfer portal as well. But then the Nico situation happens. And Nico Iamaleava was the quarterback of the future for Tennessee. We didn't really see exactly what we expected of him last year, but there was that optimism going into year 2 of maybe this will be his level up year. Well, now he's in LA with UCLA, and Joey Aguilar is Tennessee's quarterback. And so upon the arrival of Joey Aguilar, that was the expectation, was given the guys that Tennessee lost and the fact that there's a former App State quarterback as Tennessee's signal caller, this team may understandably so take a step back this year. Well, Joey Aguilar pulled a Lee Corso and said, not so fast, y'all. Within the first 2 weeks of the season, he's already more than halfway to 1,000 passing yards. He's slinging the rock. And as you all know, Tennessee has gone through its variations of offense. Josh Heupel's first years, this was a high-flying offense predicated on passing, on deep balls. Well, it's become a real ground and pound team, especially last year with Dylan Sampson. And I was expecting it to be kind of the same way this year. Joey, it's somewhat like that, but Joey Aguilar, to his credit, has been slinging the rock. His performance against Syracuse was awesome. And I also want to shout out Chris Brazel as well. He's differentiated himself so far at wide receiver. He's done a fantastic job this year. Defensively, Tennessee is holding up. They still have that same identity of toughness. Arian Carter has been a standout linebacker as expected, but circling back to defense. And this is the one thing. Well, there's 2 things here. The first thing here that's really going to tip the scale in this game is the fact that Tennessee's 2 leading corners, Jermod McCoy and Ricky Gibbs in the third, they're both sidelined for this game. And this is a matchup here where Georgia's trying to establish that tempo on offense. They've been trying to see who's that standout guy at receiver going to be. Is it going to be Zachariah Branch? Is it going to be Cash Jones? Who's it going to be? Don't forget Oscar Delp is still there. I love Oscar Delp, big body tight end, very tough. I think that he'll have a good game on Saturday. But with Tennessee's secondary taking that hit, does that breathe some life into Georgia's offense that maybe it had been lacking previously? Another thing that really intrigues me about this game is the matchup between Tennessee's offensive line and Georgia's defensive line, because Georgia's defensive line is full of dogs. I mean, you know how this team recruits with that unit. Always great at generating pressure, getting pressures. Tennessee's offensive line is a work in progress. A lot of inexperienced guys, but a lot of highly rated guys who I think when this thing gels together, it's going to be scary. But this is week 3, and this thing is coming into shape. 2:30 Central kickoff, 3:30 Eastern on ABC. These games used to be on CBS. This is when I just hear the jingling of that SEC on CBS song, going on in my head, and that's what we used to have. But we've lost touch of the world of college football when it comes to TV coverage and production, if you will. We got that 2:30 kick. It's in Neyland. Tennessee has that home field advantage. It's so hard going up to Rocky Top and getting a win. And I think that this game has all the makings of a classic. I think it's going to be physical. I think it's going to be back and forth. I think that Tennessee could even be leading this thing at halftime. But ultimately, I think that, a coach like Kirby Smart is fantastic at exposing weaknesses and deficiencies. Tennessee has it somewhat with the O-line. Tennessee has it with 2 of their starting corners being out. Kirby Smart will find a way to expose that. Georgia is favored by 3.5. And I think that Georgia wins this thing 30-27. But before we transition on to the next game, I just want to acknowledge something here. What's the conversation if Tennessee pulls this off? What is the conversation given the narratives of both these teams? For all these people, including myself, who subscribe to the narrative and the framework that this is going to be a rebuilding team, 7-5, 8-4, and they mess around and beat Georgia week 3. What does that say for Tennessee? No, are they still in the playoff conversation? What does it say about Josh Heupel and the program he's built, the job he's done in Knoxville in a year that's supposed to be a reset year? He's competing for a playoff spot. I mean, will he get that Rick Barnes lifetime contract? What's the narrative going to be? What's the conversation going to be on Sunday morning if Tennessee pulls this off surrounding the Vols? I mean, optimism through the roof. And what's the conversation around Georgia if they lose this game? Because now you're looking at this, and Georgia got beat by Ole Miss in Oxford last year. Right? I mean, that was a huge win for the Rebs, but that's a game that Georgia usually wins. They go in there, they lose. Very rainy game. But then there's that Notre Dame game on the resume as well last year. There's been that the optics of them struggling on offense ever since the SEC championship. They were down by 17 to Georgia Tech at one point. What's the conversation around Georgia if they lose this game? Is it going to be is Georgia slipping? Is the standard slipping? Are these the same dogs as we had a couple years ago? It's fascinating stuff. Just contemplating the possible outcomes and subsequent conversations of this game. But nonetheless, I think we can all agree this will be a classic between the Vols and the Dogs, per usual. Speaking of another heated, intense SEC rivalry, we've got the Gators going to Baton Rouge to take on the LSU Tigers on Saturday night. Florida, they're in wounded animal mode, to say the very least. I don't think any of us expected them to actually lose to South Florida last weekend. I thought it was a possibility. Like I thought that South Florida was really going to challenge them, but I didn't think that they would actually lose that game at home. Well, nonetheless, they did. And needless to say, given their schedule, Florida cannot afford that loss. And so now they find themselves using a trip to Death Valley as an opportunity to get right again and get back on track again. This is not by any means your prototypical get right game. No. This is, you need to have your shit together. You need to have your ducks in a row going into that bitch. Going into Death Valley, you've got to have it together. And Florida so far has been anything but that. The lack of discipline, the lack of preparedness, which is a direct reflection of head coaching, has plagued the Gators. I mean, they had 11 penalties for over 100 yards against USF. Why should I expect this to be anything different in Baton Rouge? You're on the road. You're in a high pressure situation. Effort, intensity. I haven't seen it for a full game this year. I haven't seen it for full 4 quarters. Florida is such a tremendously talented team when you go down the list of guys that are on this team, and it's unreal. That's why I had them picked to go to the playoff, because I believe in their talent profile, yes, but I believe that I believe in Billy Napier. I believe this would be the year that he would write the course, and Florida would start to do those little things right again that lead to big things, that lead to big victories. Haven't seen that. Will this be Florida's opportunity to do so? Another thing, a key to victory for the Gators in this game is consistency on the offensive side of the ball. I explained this in my analysis video of the Florida-South Florida game a few days ago. I'll see Florida. They'll really get the Pistons pumping. You know, they'll really get into a rhythm on the offensive side of the ball. You'll have Jaden Ball running that thing. You know, you'll have DJ Lagway moving and grooving. You know, you'll have Eugene Wilson in a groove. And then it just dries up. And I don't understand it. I don't understand what happens. The highs and lows of this Florida offense, it's hard to comprehend. It just fizzles out. But this is also a spot on the flip side of the coin here. This is also a spot where Florida figures it out too. Just magically, whimsically, if you will, figures it out. It's these games where nobody expects Florida to win. You know, there were several of them last year. The LSU game last year, the Ole Miss game last year. And that alleviates pressure. When nobody expects you to win, that kind of alleviates pressure. And so you're going to go in, you're going to be the bad guys, and you're going to pull off the upset. Florida's been masterful in that situation. When the pressure's on Florida under Billy Napier, they wilt. But when the momentum is on their side of having the ability to pull off an upset, they've been masterful. And this is a similar situation. They're going into the house of number 3 LSU. Nobody believes in them. Everybody's high on the LSU train. Everybody's low on Florida. So when it comes to the standpoint of momentum, very much tilts in the direction of the Florida Gators. LSU, on the other hand, they have one of the best wins on their resume that anybody has this year, outside of Miami beating Notre Dame, I'd say, Florida State beating Alabama. LSU going to Death Valley and pulling off a win was massive. But the week after, they really struggled against Louisiana Tech. I mean, they only had 2 touchdowns. The rest were field goals. They only put up 23 points. It was a very sloppy performance in a game where it was supposed to be a blowout. Now, granted, conditions weren't great, but still, it's Louisiana Tech. You're expected to really put on a show. Now, so far, LSU seems to have righted a lot of the wrongs that they had last year. I mean, run defense was a huge issue last year. That seems to have really been fastened up. Harold Perkins being back and healthy is great. Having Patrick Payton has been great for LSU so far. That's all good and well. LSU's defense has been nothing short of spectacular this year. And that was a huge question last year. I mean, that was a huge struggle last year for LSU. It lost them a lot of games. A&M ran up and down the field against them. Alabama ran up and down the field against them. South Carolina should have beaten them because of that reason too. Florida exposed them. But that has really been fastened up this year. And so I tip my cap to LSU for that. On the offensive side of the ball, Garrett Nussmeier has really limited turnovers this year. That was one of his bugaboos last year, but it wasn't necessarily all on him. A lot of it had to do with, lack of protection last year. He was having to make quick decisions, and usually when you do that, the correct position, more likely than not, you're going to make the wrong position. And he had no support from his run game number 2. And so it's really on him to make a play with his arm to keep LSU in these games. And LSU's defense was allowing a lot of points. So there was a lot on Garrett Nussmeier and not a lot to support him. It's different this year, and you can tell he's a different dude because of that. He's letting it flow in some points. I mean, that pass he had to Barry and Brown and Clemson was masterful. He looks looser. He looks more confident. But he's taking what defenses give him now. I mean, his tempo passes against Clemson, his ability to make reads quick and deliver. He's trusting what he sees because he's more confident. He's more refreshed, therefore he's more confident. And Caden Durham has someone step it up this year. I mean, he had a good performance against Clemson. Louisiana Tech was all right. Caden Durham is going to be an X factor in this game on Saturday. The way he performs will have a huge effect on the outcome of this game and how LSU performs and if they beat Florida or not. It's a spot where LSU is looking to protect what they've done so far in this short season, and Florida is trying to get back on track. This is a get-back game for Florida. Like I said, this is not the ideal get-back game. It's in Death Valley. It's going to be loud. It's going to be rowdy. The point spread shift in this game has been crazy, kind of like the last game. The last game went from Georgia minus 8.5 to Georgia minus 3.5. This is now LSU minus 8.5. And I like LSU to win and just barely cover by the score of 30-20. Even though Florida's going to be in that desperation mode and they're going to feel that urgency to get their season back on track, I just think that LSU has played with much better intensity this year. They played a complete game against Clemson. Was it clean? Was it scot-free? Was it error-free? No. But they brought the intensity all 4 quarters. I think Brian Kelly and the staff are doing a great job there right now, and they understand the pressure that's on them right now because going into this season, a lot of people in Baton Rouge were getting ready to run Brian Kelly and his staff out of town. They did what they had to do with the transfer portal, and so far it looks like they've made the organizational changes that they needed to when it comes to culture. And it's been reflected on the field. So far, we're only 2 games in. This is one of those games that will show us what LSU is made of, but I don't think they'll disappoint. I think the Bayou Bengals pull this off. All right. This one's one that's I've been talking about since May, June. And people call me crazy. Like, Brian, like you really believe in Georgia Tech that much? To where you think that they can knock off the almighty Clemson? I do. I think that they're more than capable. I think they may, in fact, do just that. I've had this circled for a while. I think that this game is going to be pivotal in how the ACC race pans out this season. This is going to be one that we're going to be revisiting in December when we're deciding on the 12 teams who make the College Football Playoff. And when it comes to who secures a berth in the ACC Championship, this game is huge. Trust me. Georgia Tech is one of my biggest sleeper teams out there. Y'all have known that for a while. I made a video about them a few months ago and got a lot of really positive feedback from Yellow Jacket fans, new subscribers. So from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate that. Haynes King right now is being monitored right now. He's got a lower body injury. So he's being monitored by the medical staff, sports science right now. But he is currently expected to suit up. And him and his combination with Jamal Haynes, it's speed. It's quickness. It's very hard to stop. But a big key to victory this weekend for the Yellow Jackets is going to be limiting turnovers. You cannot start this game with 3 turnovers like you did against Colorado. You're not going to get that cushion. You're not going to get that leeway to come back with. No. You have to assert dominance, and you have to assert dominance fast in this game. If you're Georgia Tech, you got to establish tempo. You got to get that run game going. You got to get Clemson on their heels defensively. You got to get them flustered. So limiting those turnovers is going to be huge. You have to play a clean game if you're Brent Key's Yellow Jackets. But I think they'll do that. Clemson, offensively, they've been disappointing me. They've been confusing me. I think they've been confusing themselves. They've got to find their identity on offense. They've got to get into a consistent rhythm. Because if that's one thing I've seen, there'll be some drives where Cade Klubnik comes out, he looks sharp, and there's other drives where he's kind of airbailing the ball and looking shaky. I know it hasn't been any help having Antonio Williams out for as long as they have since the first quarter of that LSU game. And it's looking like he's on pace to return for this game. So that will be a huge benefit for the Tigers if he's available for this game. But being short of your wide receiver one should not diminish the performance of your offense as much as it has for the Tigers, because this is an offense that had a lot of expectations. You're looking at Bryant Wesco, you're looking at Antonio Williams, like Cade Klubnik, really good line, really experienced line. This is a Clemson team, a Clemson offense that was expected to be very productive, and it hasn't lived up to that. They struggled a lot against Troy. They're down 17-0 to Troy. Can't happen. None of us have expected that to happen. Clemson has so far, they've been an underperforming team. But going on the road against an ACC opponent that I think could very well be playing in Charlotte come December and could very well be playing in the playoff when all is said and done. This is a huge opportunity. This is a huge springboard for Dabo Swinney and the Tigers to get back on track. And like I said about Kirby Smart, and Dabo is a coach that I trust in these big games. I really do. These are backs against the wall. This is when they bounce back. This is when they show you who they are. I think that the matchup between Georgia Tech's offensive line and Clemson's defensive line is going to be pivotal in the outcome of this game. If Clemson can get pressure, slow down that run game, I think that they can pull this thing off. But if Georgia Tech is high flying, they start running all over Clemson, they're going to take control. They may even take control by more than one score. Clemson is favored by 3.5 points right now. Oh, I'm conflicting back and forth in my head right now. But I'm going to go with my original pick. I think Georgia Tech's going to put themselves on the map. At home in Atlanta, I think this is the coming out moment. I think Georgia Tech finally pulls off this big game and wins 27-23. Don't say I didn't warn you. Okay. We have the biggest moment in CW history here. This game is on the CW network between Miami and South Florida. I work for the CW in Dallas, so this has been a great week for us here. We got a rank-on-rank matchup. The number 18 South Florida Bulls going on the road, going to Coral Gables to play the number 5 Miami Hurricanes, who a lot of us are really high on right now. And I am too. I'm quick to define them after one big win, but I think that this team definitely has the bandwidth and the potential to be an AC champion, to be a college football playoff contender, and to win some playoff games. Now, South Florida, you know the story I talked about a few days ago. They've shocked the world not once, but twice now. It wasn't the fact that they beat Boise State, who was number 25 at the time, week 1. It was how emphatically they did so, 34-7. It was the fact that they went into the swamp and took down the Gators. They were not Gator bait. The Gators were the bait to the bowl. And they pulled that shit off. Like I said, there was no fear factor for the Bulls in that game. They went into the swamp. They took care of business. There's a certain DNA that Alex Gold has instilled in this team to where this is what I call a dog team with a W. Motherfucking dogs. And so never doubt the Bulls. Never put it past them to shock the world, pull off an upset. That's also worth noting. They didn't really do anything special against Florida. I mean, offensively, they were up and down. I compared Byron Brown to Eli Manning in my analysis video the other day, and I stand on that because he was very up and down with consistency, but when South Florida needed to play, he was there to deliver. And South Florida was getting pressure on DJ Lagway the whole game, giving him fits. Will they do the same to Carson Beck in this game? And this team doesn't look perfect all the time, but they're gritty. And this is a game I think they'll show up in too. Miami has been great at playing complementary football. Carson Beck so far looks more comfortable than ever. The system seems to be a great fit. Shannon Dawson's offense so far looks like it is a great fit for Carson Beck. He looks comfortable. Mark Fletcher in the backfield has been incredibly productive, and that's opened up the passages for Carson Beck to do what he has to do. Then have the support of Malachi Tony and CJ Daniels as well. Carson Beck, so far, he seems like he's found himself. Now, we haven't gotten into ACC play yet. We'll learn a little bit more, but this is, believe it or not, this is a test for Carson Beck and these Hurricanes. And a big talking point for Miami going into this season after last year's kerfuffle is their defense. How's it going to look? How's their secondary going to be? Well, through the guidance of Corey Hedman, the new defensive coordinator, it's looked a lot better. Looks a lot more tightened up, looks a lot more fastened up. No, they looked very physical against Notre Dame, who was known for having a physical identity, one of the best secondaries in the country. No, they went toe-to-toe with Notre Dame when it came to physicality. That would not have been the case last year, I don't think. This game right here in particular, it reminds me a lot of the matchup last year between Boise State and Oregon. You had the best G5 in the nation, who I fervently believe is South Florida this year, and Boise State last year, going on the road against a top 5 team in Oregon, who everybody's very high on. That's your Miami. And I think the outcome is going to be very similar. That game came down to the wire. I believe Oregon won 37-34. Don't quote me on that score, but it was high scoring, and Boise State matched Oregon's freak, to say the least, immunity. I think that South Florida is going to match Miami's freak in this game. I do. I think they're going to bring it. I think this is going to be back and forth. I think they're going to be toe-to-toe. Miami's favored by 17.5 points. I think that's a gimme from Vegas right there. I think South Florida is going to cover. I like Miami to win. I think South Florida is going to cover. I think Miami's win by the score of 31-23. We have back and forth, riveting game. We'll keep you glued to the television for all 4 quarters. Miami wins, but we walk away saying, man, what a performance by South Florida. They really hung in there. They looked well coached. What a valiant effort. And I think this will be their only loss on the schedule this year. Looking at the rest of their schedule, I expect South Florida to win out, barring anything insane, which, could happen in college football, given the landscape now. But I think that at the end of the day, you'll see South Florida be 11-1. This will be their only loss. So look back on this game and say, hey, no, they went to the swamp, beat Florida. They went to Miami, almost beat the Canes. They won the American, booked them in the playoff. All right, this one here, we're going to talk about this John right here. Wisconsin, the Badgers going on the road to Tuscaloosa, my favorite town in this world, to take on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, trust me, Wisconsin has its share of problems. I mean, if you were a therapist and Wisconsin was a patient, you'd be hearing them go on and on and on and on about the problems they're facing. Danny O'Neal, he's been consistent somewhat, but he has 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, so nothing really special, but he's done what he's had to do so far to take care of business. Wisconsin lacks that identity on the offensive side of the ball that they had when it came to being predicated on the run game. Wisconsin was always known to run down your throat. Always developed fantastic running backs and go through the years. Jonathan Taylor, Monty Ball, Melvin Gordon, Braylon Edwards. The list goes on and on and on. They don't have that right now. They don't have that element, and it really confuses me. At this point, I expected more out of Luke Fickell's guidance up in Madison. And maybe this is the year they figured out, maybe this is a marquee win for them. But, man, they've been a team it's been very hard for them to figure out and really get the Pistons pumping. And while Wisconsin has its share of problems, so does Alabama. Yes, the Tide bounced back last weekend. hanging 73 on the poor Warhawks of Louisiana Monroe. I feel bad for them. That had to be the game that they went to Tuscaloosa for, facing the Tide on a loss. But that Florida State game exposed a lot of flaws. Not physically, not from a talent standpoint, but a lot of flaws from a coaching standpoint for the Tide. Their effort was pathetic. Their preparation was pathetic. And you look at Kalen DeBoer's track record right now, and if we can use this word yet with Kalen DeBoer, Alabama, I'm going to here. Historically, this is the kind of game that Kalen DeBoer struggles in at Alabama. You're playing an unranked team who you should beat with somewhat relative ease, and yet you let them hang around. Not because they're matching you from a talent standpoint, but because you're letting them. Because you're not showing intensity for all 4 quarters. Because you're not prepared. Your players aren't showing consistent effort. This is an opportunity for DeBoer to not change the narrative just yet, because a win in this game will not do that. But start to change the conversation. Start to give people in Tuscaloosa, Alabama fans, a reason to believe in your staff, a reason to believe in your guidance. Because right now, despite what happened last weekends, it's thin. You're facing an unranked Power 4 opponent. This is like the Oklahoma game last year. This is like the Vandy game last year. Not quite Florida State. I think Florida State's really good, but they were unranked at the time. Alabama was expected to take care of business. They didn't. They lost by multiple possessions. Do you let Wisconsin hang around in this thing? Do you let them hang in the 4th quarter? If you do, they may be able to pull off that upset. But I do think that in this game, Alabama knows what they have to do. I think that Alabama has a lot of matchup advantages. Their receivers against Wisconsin's secondary. Their defensive line against Wisconsin's offensive line, vice versa. I think that those will show through. And I know that I said that for the Florida State game too, and look where that got me. Alabama's favored by 21.5 points. And at some point, if you're Vegas, you have to rethink these point spreads, because it's not Nick Saban, Alabama anymore. I think we got to kind of recalibrate expectations somewhat. But maybe this is the game that enables us to recalibrate what we expect out of the Tide this year. Because I'll be honest, my expectations dropped drastically. This was a team I picked to win the national championship before the season. After that loss to Florida State, I was really rethinking, contemplating a lot of things. But like I said, Alabama's favored by 21.5 points. They're at home. This is an 11 a.m. kick. God bless the students that will be at that game. Very little time to rally. I used to hate 11 a.m. kickoffs when I was at Bama. I like Alabama to win this thing 42-17. I think they're flat the better team, and they should pull off to that extent. And if they don't, we will once again be having some serious conversations next week. All right. Last, but most certainly not least, we have what Michael Buffer likes to call the main events. Let's get ready to rumble in South Bend with this absolute blockbuster game between number 16 Texas A&M and number 8 Notre Dame. A rematch of last year's contest that took place in College Station. I picked Texas A&M to win that game, and, well, that didn't happen. I got into the whiskey that night. I got into Fireball, too. I got into all sorts of stuff that night. I was very angry after that game, and I made it known. But since my confidence has been restored in those Aggies, and I will also precurse my analysis of this game with this. These are two teams that historically I have struggled mightily with picking. Whenever I pick a game with A&M, whenever I pick a game with Notre Dame, I get it wrong. And now they're playing each other. So you can watch this video. And if you do, I really appreciate it. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button below. But if I'm wrong, don't come crying to me, because I warned you. I gave you that disclaimer. But nonetheless, here we go. This game was played in Kyle Field last year. Now it's being played up in South Bend. When is Mike Elko going to get that signature win? A&M had some huge wins last year. They built some momentum. They were 8-1 at one point. So Mike Elko has given this fan base a reason to be excited, a reason to be optimistic. I think that there's been a noticeable shift in how guys handle their business on A&M under the guidance of Mike Elko, compared to how they did with Jimbo Fisher. I think that there's been a clear shift in culture, and that's great. But you have to deliver in a big spot at some point. If you're a head coach like Mike Elko, you're in your second year, you need that signature win. It's going to be used as a mechanism to build momentum and something that can be used as an advertising tool for recruits to continue to bring those 4 and 5 stars from the state of Texas and beyond into College Station, showing them this is what we do in College Station. This is what we're made of. This is the fabric of our being. We get shit done. We win big games. We go into South Bends. We pull this off. A&M is looking for that win because right now there's that narrative of, Texas A&M, big games. They're playing a team who's in the Natty last year. Watch them go up to South Bends and melt. Do you want that to be the conversation? Everybody within the walls of that A&M organization, I guarantee you that's not the conversation they want to be having. And I'm sure that this week those practices are brutal. Those 6:30 a.m. lifts are grueling right now. And I have confidence that A&M is going to be very prepared for this game as well, because they know the narrative surrounding this. This has the potential to be a signature win for the Aggies, and then of course there's the 8-4 narrative. If A&M loses this game, it's watch the Aggies going to go 8-4 again. This organization, those players, the staff, which is very good by the way, A&M's fan base, they're ready to turn the page. They're ready to put that behind them. And I think they have the ingredients in place to do just that. A&M's offense looks fast. It looks quick. If you're an opposing defense, it looks like an absolute headache to contain. Marcel Reed, the dual threat quarterback, I know he has his ups and downs, but his skill set is unreal. His ability to escape, his ability to expand the pocket, make throws on the run. He's great. Mario Craver in the receiving core has been a standout. Casey Concepcion so far, that acquisition, as we call it these days, has been great for the Aggies. Defense, it's been spotty at times. We've kind of seen that these past 2 games, but I really think that's going to get into shape, and A&M knows it's definitely physical to win this game. That's how Notre Dame plays. That's how you saw Miami match Notre Dame and pull off. A&M knows definitely physical, and I think that they're going to do just that. Now, turning the page to the Irish. This is a really weird, really peculiar spot to be in for week 3 if you're the Irish. They're 0-1. They're just in the Natty, and they're 0-1. You'll say, well, Notre Dame sucks, number 1. Number 2, why did they play a game in week 2? Well, they already have a bye, which I think is advantageous. You'll lose week 1. You have a week to regroup before a high-octane matchup like A&M. You have an SEC team coming to town, a very good SEC team in A&M. I think this team's going to be rested. And when you have a great staff led by a great leader like Marcus Freeman, you don't shy away from these moments. You don't shy away from these situations. You embrace them and you use them to make you better, to make this a more complete team. Yes, Notre Dame has the potential to go 0-2 this weekend. And that is not an ideal start for the Irish at all. Sets them very far behind the 8 ball. And I've even heard murmurings of, if Notre Dame goes 10-2, could they possibly be left out of the playoff? I don't think so. They made the Natty last year. They go 10-2, they'll be in. And I think that they could win out, even if they lose this game. However, well-coached team, great staff, fantastic roster, at home, and a spot with their back against the wall. Great teams, great rosters, great staffs with their backs against the wall. They usually prevail. We need to see the key to this game. We need to see more out of Jeremiah Love. Week 1 against Miami, he quite honestly just didn't get as many touches as he should. Feed number 4 of the rock. When you have somebody like that, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's as simple as give the ball to your best player. Your two best players on your offense are as follows: Jeremiah Love and Jaden Greathouse. Those are your two best players on offense. Find a way to get those guys the ball. CJ Carr had his ups and downs in his first game, but we need to see more explosive plays out of him in this game if Notre Dame wants to pull this off. A&M's offense, it's been fast. However, they're playing what I think would be one of the best defenses in college football. Notre Dame's secondary is phenomenal. And I'm excited to see the matchup between Notre Dame's offensive line and Texas A&M's defensive line, because Notre Dame's offensive line is kind of battered. You know, you've got a lot of second-team guys on there because of injuries and whatnot. But I still don't doubt those offensive lines because they're very well coached. And A&M is going to bring the pressure. They always do. But I think Notre Dame upholds. The Irish are favored by 6.5, which I think is kind of large for this. I was kind of feeling more 4.5, maybe 4, if you ask me. But nonetheless, I do like the Irish to pull this game off, 34-28. That's all we've got, folks, for today. Again, my thoughts and prayers go out to Charlie Kirk and his family. Absolutely crushing news today, and there's no room for that in this world by any means. And so, everybody do what you got to do. Absorb what happened. It was a real tragedy, and I hope it serves as a real turning point for where we're going to head as a country and as a society here. We can't let politics get us to this point. All right. We have to let God back in. We've been far from God for too long, and this is our sign. We need to let God back in again. So, everybody, take time to pray. Let him in tonight. Read your Bible. Meditate on Scripture. Let him in. Thank you all for watching. This was a great show. I love going through these predictions tonight. We have a very exciting weekend. So I'm going to be glued to my television watching these games. It's going to be a very fun time. But let me know what y'all think about these predictions in the comment section below. Thank you all for watching. Have a great day.